Canadian football fans, and welcome to another CFL All-Stars video. We take a look at each division, position by position, and player by player to look at the Canadian Football League All-Stars in a given season, and also which ones made the All-Canadian team. And with Canada Day coming, I figured this would be the best time to post these. And for this two-part series, we'll go back to Canada's Centennial year of 1967. The Grey Cup that year, of course, was held in the nation's capital of Ottawa, Ontario, in front of a sellout crowd of over 31,000 at Frank Clair Stadium to see the Hamilton Tiger Cats with those amazing Centennial helmets and one of the greatest defenses in CFL history take on the powerful Saskatchewan Roughriders, who had a fantastic defense themselves and were pretty proficient on the offensive side of the ball too. But it was the Cats' defense that won out in a total wallop, 24-1. But we'll start with the Western Division, but first let's take a look at Canadian entertainment world in the year of 1967. But of course, I should mention the video that you're seeing right in front of you is the worldwide festival and fair known as Expo 67, which took place in Montreal, which was a huge deal for the nation and a big success. The world of Canadian television saw a historic debut on February 13, 1967, when children's program Mr. Dress-Up debuted on CBC. And it would air all the way to February 14, 1996, after 4,000 episodes. Ernie Combs, a former protege of Mr. Rogers and his titular character, would perform imaginary games, singing songs, telling stories, making crafts, and of course, dressing up. But that character would go on to be a Canadian pop culture icon. Also, a popular cartoon at the time, which has since become a cult favorite, was also a Canadian production titled Rocket Robin Hood, which also aired on CBC, a futuristic take on the legendary English folklore outlaw. Meanwhile, over on CTV, a popular news information program known as W5 was starting to gain traction and garnered big ratings for the network. And we had the future and the Old West with Canadian actors dominating on television and making waves. William Shatner, native of Montreal, was about to enter his second season playing the role of Captain James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise on the sci-fi adventure Star Trek. Despite facing tough competitions and somewhat low ratings, it did do strong on certain demographics, and it enters its second season in late 1967. Little did anyone know what a pop culture phenomenon it was about to become. Meanwhile, on the Ponderosa, Ottawa native Lorne Greene was about to enter his ninth season playing patriarch Ben Cartwright on the critically and commercially successful hit western, Bonanza. One of Canada's finest actors of this, or for that matter any era, is Christopher Plummer. The native of Toronto, Ontario, played real-life World War II figure Erwin Rommel in Night of the Generals alongside UK heavyweight actors Pierre O'Toole, Omar Sharif, Tom Courtenay, and Donald Pleasance. The film, however, got mixed reviews and did okay in certain box offices around the world, but the actors, including Plummer, were all praised for their performances. However, one of the best films of the year, and maybe of all time, was directed by another Toronto, Ontario native, Norman Jewison. University of Toronto graduate from 1949, directed the groundbreaking and hard-hitting drama In the Heat of the Night, starring the great Rod Steiger and legendary Sidney Poitier. If you haven't seen this film, see it. Jewison's direction was heavily praised by critics. It was a box office hit as well. The film was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, including Jewison for Best Director. Sadly, however, he would lose, but it still won 5 awards, including Best Actor for Steiger and Best Picture. The Canadian music scene in 1967 was alive and kicking in a huge way. The patriotic Centennial theme, simply titled Canada by the Young Canada Singers, written by legendary Canadian orchestra leader and trumpeter Bobby Gimby, it was to celebrate the Canadian Centennial celebrations as well as Expo 67, and went on to number 1 on the charts for 2 weeks. Still a couple years away, however, from worldwide popularity were the Guess Who, led by 23-year-old Randy Bachman on guitar and 19-year-old vocalist Burton Cummings. They have a catchy radio hit, which reached the top 20 called His Girl. And who else but the great Gordon Lightfoot would write a legendary song for the Centennial celebrations, the epic Canadian Railroad Trilogy, which was used on CBC programming several times. It told the amazing story of the construction of the Canadian Pacific Railway. Folk country duo, husband and wife team Ian and Sylvia had a top 40 hit this year with Love and Sound, which became one of their signature tunes as they became one of the most popular touring acts across the country and gained quite a following in the US. And 1967 would also see an unlikely musician hit the scene, a unique and dark lyrical poet known as Leonard Cohen, who late in the year would release his debut, Songs of Leonard Cohen. The 33-year-old Montreal native was already a published poet since the late 1950s and had a cult following. The album and its unique haunting tone over the years has become a classic, highly acclaimed, and eventually went gold in the United States in 1989. And it made Rolling Stone magazine's top 500 albums of all time. Edmonton-born teen idol Bobby Kurtola, who hit the scene at 17 years old in 1960, already had 27 top 40 hits before 1967. Well, he added 2 more to the resume with It's Not Funny, Honey and Give Me a Reason to Stay. And now to the football. In 1967 was a good year for the CFL. Believe it or not, the league was actually immensely popular, drawing big crowds from coast to coast in the 9-team league at the time. TV coverage of both CBC and CTV drew excellent ratings. But let's look at the teams this season in the Western Division. The 5-team West was led by the Calgary Stampeders. They were looking for their first Grey Cup win since 1948. They had the longest active slump in the league, and they finished with an excellent record of 12-4-0. In second place, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, the defending Grey Cup champions, still looking like a well-oiled machine, also at 12-4-0. The Edmonton Eskimos, who are looking for their first Grey Cup since 1956, finished third with a 9-6-1 record. Finishing at a lowly 4-12-0 were the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who've had 2 rough seasons since appearing in the Grey Cup in 1965. Their last win was only just back in 1962. And in dead last, the BC Lions, with a record of 3-12-1. And they had just won the Grey Cup in 1964, but haven't made the playoffs since. And speaking of the playoffs, the Riders destroyed the Eskimos 21-5 as their defense really stepped up on this one. And the Riders faced the Stamps in the Western Final, but barely won the best of 3 series. Yes, that was the West playoffs back then. The Stamps won the first game, the Riders took the next 2, and made it to the Grey Cup for the second straight season, winning the West. Well, we're just about ready. And I should mention, positioning was much different, as were the labeled position that is, in the CFL in 1967. And there were also no special team selections back then, remember. Also remember, there were no statistics for sacks or tackles at this time, but interceptions were still counted. Either way, here we go. And we start with the defense. We start at defensive end with Windsor, Ontario-born Dick Suderman of the Calgary Stampeders. At an imposing 6'5" and over 240 pounds, he was an agile defensive end that could break through even the best offensive lines in the league, and could even avoid double-team attempts to pressure QBs, and often getting to running backs that try to break down the sideline. This was his breakout season and first selection of his career, and he was a fan favorite in Calgary already before he had this great season. Sticking with defensive end, we go to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and Bill Whistler, a bulldozing type end who can pivot and change direction in a hurry and be committed to adding pressure and committing to the tackle. Despite how rough this Bombers team has fallen, he is still a bright spot and perhaps the only bright spot on this defense. And the Bombers defense did struggle many times this season, but Whistler tried to keep it as best as he could. This is his second selection, his first being in 1964. But here's where things get a little weird, and I guess the voting criteria was all over the place for the CFL back then, and its selections, and I gotta tell you, researching these videos, especially for the CFL, not easy. Very hard to come by, believe me. However, I have found 3 different sources that have said this to be true. That E.A. Sims, defensive end for the Eskimos, was selected as an All-Canadian despite not receiving a divisional selection. Regardless, however, Sims was indeed one of the faster rush ends in the league and used his speed to catch up to QBs who often ran out of the pocket to take them down and avoided their scrambling. And he could also keep up with speedy running backs as well. He was a divisional All-Star in the prior 2 seasons in 1965 and 66, and this is his second and last All-Canadian selection as he accomplished that last season. He was traded to BC in the 1968 season where he stayed until he retired in 1970. We move to defensive tackle and stay with the Edmonton Eskimos and rookie John Legrone. Some scouts were concerned about his height, but the Southern Methodist graduate played a bulldozing style, played with heart and passion for the game. He was ferocious and tenacious out on the field on any given day or night, and for any given play, and to many was considered the heart of this growing Eskimos defense. He became a quick fan favorite, and this, of course, being his rookie year, makes it his first selection. Staying with defensive tackle, we move to the Western champion Saskatchewan Roughriders, and the Shenley Award winner for the CFL's most outstanding lineman, Ed McQuarters. Intense, fearsome, dominant, nasty, yet also a sportsman. Those are just some of the words to describe this Oklahoma Sooners star who debuted last year and won a Grey Cup. But this year, he not only showed how great he can be when it comes to his drive to make a play, but also his emphasis on winning and giving his team an advantage. And yeah, quite a few QBs paid the price very heavily. So did many sizable running backs who thought they could take him on head on, and they would learn the hard way that they won't always be successful. And even offensive linemen were sometimes dropped due to being unable to contain this monstrous, forceful man. This is indeed his first selection, and he was the standout on this Riders defense. And of course, it almost goes without saying, he gets his first All-Canadian selection as well, meaning the West takes 2 spots out of 4 on the defensive line. Now we move to the linebacking core. And we start with Calgary's Stampeder superstar, the great Wayne Harris. One of the best linebackers in the entire league since he first suited up for the Stamps back in '61, and I'll honestly say went on to be one of the best linebackers of all time. His impactful tackling and abilities to follow a running pattern and commit to stopping anyone with the ball were just uncanny, and he was the biggest highlight of this already highly talented and stacked Stampeders defense. He would charge at QBs unexpectedly on given plays too and strike fear into them. He is also a great pass cover man. He snagged 4 interceptions this year as well. He was a leader by example, respected by his teammates as a leader as well. This is his 7th consecutive and overall selection. He has been an all-star every year he has played in the CFL, and of course all spent with the Stamps. And for the 4th straight season and 5th time, the first being in 1962, Wayne Harris was named to the All-Canadian team. We again go back to Saskatchewan, and a true rhino as the linebacker, Garner Ekstrand. His combination of size and speed allowed him to make absolutely brutal tackles that looked like they could leave an imprint on any given turf. Part of the strategic Green Riders defense, he could shift momentum with a big defensive play for his team and brought an element of intensity that his team could feed off of. This is his 4th and final All-Star selection, as he had selections in 62, 63, and 66. And he also achieved his 3rd and final All-Canadian selection, as prior to coming in 62 and 63. He would join the BC Lions in 1968 and retired at the end of that season. And the next linebacker spot stays with Saskatchewan. We move to Wayne Shaw. From the very small village town of Bladworth, Saskatchewan, this prairie boy was embraced by Riders fans as truly one of their own. He had that tough farm boy mentality, ready to take on anything despite any given elements that stand in his way. No job was too easy or too hard for him. And speaking of hard, his hard work ethic made him not just a vicious tackler, but a determined one at that. There would be no extra yardage gained on his watch. That's the way he played the game. This is his 4th selection, achieving such in 63, 64, and last year in 66. And it's a sweep for the Western Division at the linebacking core for All-Canadian selections, as Shaw achieves his very first All-Canadian berth. And now we move to the secondary, the defensive backs. And we start off with a tried and true, pure and natural athlete in every sense of the word. I'm talking Jerry Keeling of the Calgary Stampeders. 6'1", 175 pounds. He had all the right tools. He was fast, agile, a quick thinker, good hands. No receiver was too fast or too smart for him. He knew how to cover the best in the league, and it showed all season long. So much so, he snagged 5 interceptions. And because of that, that's tied for 5th best in the CFL. He could break up what seemed to be the most flawless play patterns from the best offenses, and much like many of his Stampeders teammates, the hard work he put in made a big difference game in and game out. And to top it off, even though he only took a few snaps this season, he's also one of their backup quarterbacks, and is very reliable in that position. This is Keeling's 4th straight and overall selection, dating back to 1964. Keeling also makes the All-Canadian team for the 3rd time, having done so prior in 64 and 65. Next up, we return to the Edmonton Eskimos, and their selection, John Wadarny. The former Western Ontario graduate began his career for the Toronto Argonauts in 1963 and stayed there for 3 seasons until 1965. He joined the Eskimos last season and began to thrive a bit more in his role as this team seemed to know what to do with him. He was able to frustrate receivers who seemed to be making sure catches and quarterbacks who throw seemingly perfect. He's what this growing Eskimos defense needs, and that's consistency and playmaking. He garnered 6 interceptions this season. That's tied for 2nd best in the entire league. This is his very first selection. Sticking with the Edmonton Eskimos and still at defensive back is Joe Hernandez. Joe had an amazing reach and incredible speed and could make big defensive plays in the secondary. He also changed direction on a dime, and he was very hard to fool. He had trouble finding his footing in the sport, however, as he did start in the CFL in 1962 with the Argos, and actually did play for the Eskimos in 63, but after a failed tenure with the NFL's Washington Redskins and failing to make the main roster for the Atlanta Falcons back in 1966, he returned to the CFL this season with a vengeance and something to prove. And it worked. He too garnered 6 interceptions, again tied for second in the league, and with that his first All-Star selection. And we go back to Saskatchewan and Bruce Bennett, a former Florida Seminole All-American. He joined the Green Riders last year, part of that Grey Cup team. He wasn't an overly big man, but wow, was he ever fast! And he played with all his heart and soul, and it truly paid dividends, making him a fantastic addition to this already amazing squad. He garnered 5 interceptions, which was tied for 5th best in the league, and was one of the best cover men on the long ball in the league, as QBs and receivers who thrived on the long bomb attack would often be stymied by Bennett. This is his first All-Star selection. And for the final defensive back selection in the West, we moved to Calgary and the Stampeders and Frank Andruski. He was fast, he had great hands to pick up passes, but also was actually quite smart. He was a cerebral type player. His ability to catch on to a team's given play, or even their overall strategy in a whole game, was an asset to the Stampeders team. He joined the team last season as a rookie, and had his breakout year this year in 1967. He snagged 5 picks, again tied for 5th best in the league, and was key in the Stamps team starting to be dominant. This is his very first selection. And on top of that, it's also his very first All-Canadian selection. And the West takes up 2 out of the 5 defensive back spots in the All-Canadian team, but 7 out of 12 on defense, winning that side of the ball. But now we switch gears to the other side on offense, and we start with the men in the trenches, the offensive line. And we start at center with the Western champion Saskatchewan Roughriders and Ted Ernez. He's a hometown boy of Regina, beloved by fans. 6'3", 225 pounds, he has the man's star QB, Ron Lancaster, puts all his trust in since arriving in the province capital. Great communication and protection for his QB. Quick off the snap into the block, his blocking capabilities also produce great success for the Riders' incredible running game to boot. This is his 3rd straight and overall selection. And to boot, it's his 3rd straight All-Canadian selection. And we stay with the Riders and their incredible offensive line as we move to offensive guard and Jack Abenchan. 6'2", 245, known for his great leg strength, he was able to plant his feet and come up with a block. And hey, everybody had trouble moving him. But when he needed to move, he could always keep up. It was also beneficial to both Reed and Lancaster and created space and time for his offense to move. He was fierce, intense, and had the heart of a lion. A true warrior and leader out there for the Green Riders. And he was also the team's kicker. He booted 89 points. This is his 2nd straight and overall All-Star selection. And for the very first time, makes the All-Canadian team. We move to Calgary and stay at guard with Bob Lewick. 6'2", 250 pounds. He was a major key in allowing time for the Stampeders' top-notch offense, mainly their passing game, to thrive as it did this season, providing tremendous protection and is a driving force at maintaining some of the best and toughest defensive lines in the league and controlling them, no matter who it is or what they were capable of. Lewick had a raw toughness about him that allowed him not to be intimidated by even some of the toughest men in the league. This is his first All-Star selection. And we stay with the Stamps, but move to offensive tackle and Roger Kramer. 6'5", 280 pounds. He's everything an offensive lineman at tackle should be. Strong, big, tough. Best of all, the ability to push defensive ends completely out of the play and allow us quarterbacks and running backs to excel. That's exactly what the Stamps' top-ranked offense in the whole league did. He began his career at the Montreal Alouettes in 1962. It was his play with the Ottawa Rough Riders from 1963 to 64 where his 2 prior divisional selections came from. That showed what he can do. He joined the Stamps in 1965, and this is his first selection with Calgary, the 3rd of his career, and last. He had retired as a Stampeder after the 1970 season. And for the final offensive line selection for the West, and on offensive tackle, we return to the Saskatchewan Roughriders and Clyde Brock. 6'5", over 275 pounds. He was the man that allowed the dominant running game of the Riders to excel with runs on the outside near the sideline where they could take off and pick up significant yardage. He was an eager competitor, always ready to make a difference, and couldn't wait for that ball to snap and make his move, and make the step to the defenders and push them back with all his might. anchoring perhaps what is one of the greatest offensive line cores in CFL history. This is his third consecutive in overall selection, and his second consecutive in overall All-Canadian selection, as the Riders take up 3 out of the 5 offensive line spots on the All-Canadian team. Remarkable. Well, now we move to the receivers. We revisit the lowly Winnipeg Blue Bombers and Hannah, Alberta native Ken Nielsen, a speedster who can catch a short pattern pass and gain extra yardage, and great at dodging tackles and quick hands. He can also go for the long ball and turn up some extra quickness to either gain more yardage or get the touchdown. He's one of just 3 receivers in the entire CFL to reach 1,000 plus yards. This is 1,121 yards, was third best in the league. He also caught a total of 76 receptions, which was second best, averaging 14.8 yards a catch. And he caught 9 touchdowns, which for receiving touchdowns was tied for second best in the league and third overall best in the league for overall touchdowns. This is his first selection. And we moved to tight end into the Calgary Stampeders and the great Herm Harrison. He had a towering size, but was also deceptively quick and could fool defenders by taking off at a given moment with the ball. Known as ham hands due to the largeness of them, and it almost like he could swarm the entire football once he caught it, making it hard for him to fumble or anyone to cause it, which also gave him a big advantage. He could also provide that extra block and wasn't afraid of any defenders and could knock them on their rear end. He caught 57 passes, third best in the league, for 721 yards, which is 9th best, and scored 9 receiving touchdowns, again tied for second and tied for third in overall touchdowns. Tabooty is actually coming off a season where he missed 10 games, so this is a comeback for him. He garners his second All-Star selection, getting his first in 1965. Then at split end, we stay in Calgary, go to the phenomenal Montreal-born marvel, Terry Evanshin, the winner of the Shenley Award for the CFL's Most Outstanding Canadian. Lightning quick, fast thinker, incredible hands, secure football grasp, and legs that can change on a dime to avoid tackles. He could make spectacular highlight reel catches, but he wasn't doing it to get on the news. He was doing it so his team can win the game. He was the final piece of the puzzle of this already impactful Stampeders passing game, as he records his second straight 1,000-yard season with the league-leading 1,662 yards receiving, averaging over 100 yards per game. Insane. And at that time, in 1967, that was the second best receiving yards mark in CFL history. He led the league with 96 receptions, a new CFL record, beating the old record held by the great Hal Patterson of 88 back in 1956. He held that record until 1975. He averaged 17.3 yards per catch, which was 8th best in the league, and 17 touchdown catches, tying the record set by Saskatchewan's Hugh Campbell the prior season, a record that they would share all the way until 1984. The man indeed who turned up the ignition and revved the engine for the Calgary Stampeders. This is his third consecutive All-Star selection. His first was in 1965 with the Alouettes, and the last 2 have been with the Stamps. And of course, because of all this, he is named to the All-Canadian team for the very first time. This would be the only receiving selection that West would grab, however. Now we move to the backfield. And we finally head back to the Edmonton Eskimos, and running back Jim Thomas. One of only 2 running backs this season to rush for over 1,000 yards, hitting exactly 1,006, second best in the CFL. He had come close the prior 2 seasons reaching 1,000. He had 980 plus in both those years, and this is his new career high. At 6'2", 195 pounds, he did have a bit of a strength to power through defenses and gain that yardage, but also could get a burst of turbo speed and break away for major gains. He was also good for quick yard catches, getting 265 in short yardage receptions, the yards that is. His 5.8 yards per carry was third best in the CFL, and his 6 rushing touchdowns were tied for third. This would be his third consecutive overall and last CFL All-Star selection. This also gives Thomas his second straight overall and last All-Canadian selection. He would have 2 more 800-yard plus seasons in 68 and 69, but injuries caught up to him and he retired after the 1971 season. Okay, back to Winnipeg as we stay at running back and we go to the Bombers and we have former Michigan Wolverine Dave Ramey. A quick thinking running back who can make all the right moves and take off at any given moment. He again was one of the few good things in this Bombers club. After back-to-back 1,000-yard rushing seasons, he rushed for 772 yards, which was still good enough for third best in the league. He averaged 6.2 yards a carry, which was second best in the league. He's also tremendous at the short yardage patterns, in terms of catches and added 470 yards receiving to boot, and led the league in kick return yardage with 744 yards on returns, giving him a league-leading 1,986 all-purpose yards. He really could do it all, and he was loved by fans in the Peg. This is his third straight and overall All-Star selection. Then the last running back selection for the West, one of the all-time greats, the one and only George Reed of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. At 6 feet, over 200 pounds, he had the brute intensity of a fullback. He knew how to power through even the toughest and best tacklers in the league. He fought for every yard he could gain and wouldn't give up till the play was whistled dead. He could take off and not be caught at any given moment with his amazing stride and a big run that at times looked more like a big leap. He knew how to pace out his game, was the ultimate strategist, and his communication with quarterback Ron Lancaster made them one of the most dangerous combos in the history of the Canadian Football League. Reed led the league in rushing for the third straight season with 1,471 yards, his fourth straight 1,000-yard rushing season. He had 4.9 yards per carry and led the league with 15 rushing touchdowns and added 1 receiving TD, leaving him with 16 overall touchdowns, putting him second in that category just to Evanston. This is Reed's third straight and overall selection. Also, it's his third straight overall All-Canadian selection to nobody's surprise. And the West takes 2 out of 3 backfield spots. Now, it has come to this. Who is the Western All-Star pivot? Indeed, it is the man who led the most dangerous passing offense in the league, Calgary Stampeders quarterback Pete Lisk, a sizable pivot who was hard to bring down due to his frame, 6'3", over 200 pounds. He had great protection, precision, but if defenders did get to him, he could shake them off and still make a play. His chemistry with Edmonton and Harrison was remarkable, as he had a cannon for an arm, but could also make strategic short plays to simply move the ball and was tremendous at working the clock. He was a thinking man's QB. A former college star at Penn State, he began his pro career as a backup for the AFL New York Jets. However, he came to the Toronto Argonauts in 1965, then joined the Stampeders a year later in 66. He showed some potential, but really hadn't found his footing. Well, he did this year. He commanded the field every which way, he put on a spectacle, and fans of Calgary loved him for it. This was a man who needed to lead the offense at the time, and he was almost like a bullseye shooter with those precise passes. He led the CFL with an incredible 4,479 yards. That was the second best mark in league history at that time. And he threw a whopping 40 touchdown passes, a new CFL record, breaking the record of 38, set by Argos quarterback Tobin Rote in 1960. And Lisk held that record all the way until 1993, when it was broken by another Stampeder, a fellow by the name of Doug Flutie. Also, count it up, 303 completions, another CFL record, beating the record of Sam the Rifle Echeverry from 1956. That one stood until 1980 when Deer Brock broke it, and it's been broken again a few times after. After his phenomenal 59.6 completion percentage, that also led the league. He checked off all the boxes in what had to be one of the greatest years from any quarterback in CFL history. And that's why he was the recipient of the Shenley Award for the CFL's Most Outstanding Player. However, this would be his only All-Star selection. And of course that means this would be his only All-Canadian selection. Lisk did have another great year the following season in 1968, even led the Stamps to the Western title and played in the Grey Cup, but they suffered a heartbreaking loss. However, he was called to play in the AFL once again as backup for the Denver Broncos. However, the AFL-NFL merger took place, and he was the starter in 1970 for the Broncos, playing 9 games for them as a starter, and he wasn't that great, and neither was the rest of the team. He moved to the Philadelphia Eagles in 1971, started 10 games, had some decent outings, but overall, the Eagles just weren't good either. And then in 1972, he started 7 games, and the Eagles were just downright awful. In 1973, he returned to the Stampeders and actually got as much fanfare upon his return. But the team, well, they weren't very good now either, despite having won a Grey Cup in 1971. The next season told the same story, and during that season, he was traded to the BC Lions, who did make the playoffs but lost the semifinals. He played a full season in BC in 1975 and actually played some pretty great games, but they finished with a 6-10 record and missed the playoffs, and Lisk would retire after the season at just 33 years old. However, this means the West takes 7 out of 12 offensive selections in addition to the 7 out of 12 they took on defense, meaning they take 14 out of 24 All-Canadian spots with 10 left for the East. Every year since All-Canadian teams were selected since 1962, the West always has more selections. And some say it's due to having better teams and players. Some say it's simply because they have more teams. Who knows? Out of the 24 Western selections, a huge 10 have made the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. It was mostly Stamps and Riders, so no surprise. Wayne Harris, the great linebacker, retired in 1972. He got the call in his first year of eligibility in 1976. George Reed of the Rough Riders, who retired as the CFL's all-time rushing leader in 1975, of course was the first ballot Hall of Famer in 1979. The receiving phenom known as Terry Evanson, who had a tremendous career, retired in 1978, had to wait a couple extra years, but he got his induction in 1984. Ed McWhirters, the big defensive lineman for the Riders, retired in 1974, waited a while, but got the call to the Hall in 1988. A year later, Jerry Keeling, who later became the Stamps quarterback, and the phenom indeed, his career ended in 1975, waited a fair bit himself, but took his rightful spot. That same year, in 1989, Riders offensive lineman center Ted Ernest, who retired back in 1970, had to wait many years for his rightful enshrinement. The same goes for Stamps star receiver Herm Harrison, who retired in 1972, but was able to accept the honor in 1993. Finally, the Bombers get some representation here, as backfield phenom Dave Ramey was inducted in the year 2000, retiring all the way back in 1974. Jack Abenchen of the Green Riders, one of the best to ever play the offensive line, retired in 1975, waited over 30 years since his eligibility began to finally be inducted in 2012. And lastly, every All-Star on this Rider line has now been inducted into the Hall of Fame, as Clyde Brock, who retired in 1975, waited over 40 years, yes, 40 years, since becoming eligible, and was inducted at long last in 2020. 5 Riders, 4 Stamps, and a Bomber. However, there are some here that may have been overlooked, including 3 more Rough Rider players. I mentioned in my 1972 video that Bruce Bennett, a 6-time divisional All-Star defensive back, is long overdue. Some attribute this to having just one All-Canadian selection. So does Terry Evanson. But some people get in with just even one, like Terry Evanson. It's the same thing for linebacker Wayne Shaw, who again, 6-time All-Star and 1 All-Canadian selection. Gardner Ekstrom was grossly underrated. He had 4 division selections, but 3 All-Canadian. The only one who's still alive out of the 3 former Riders players is Shaw, and he's approaching his late 80s. There's 2 from the Eskimos who deserve mention. Running back Jim Thomas, 3-time All-Division, 2-time All-Canadian, 5 straight 800-yard-plus rushing seasons. Also, John Legrone, their defensive tackle, 6-time All-Division, 2-time All-Canadian. He even won the CFL's Most Outstanding Lineman in 1969. Sadly, both have passed away, and the only reason I can think of the Eskimo players haven't been honored was because they retired before the new Eskimos dynasty of the 70s could happen and got overshadowed by many of those great players. And indeed, the amount of All-Stars each team has in order and placing is the same placing of the division itself. Calgary leads the way with 9, squeaking out the Riders. They have 5 with that incredible passing offense of theirs, and 4 with their excellent defense to boot. Crazy as the Stamps only had 3 last year, but they also led this in 1965 with 8. The Western Champion Rough Riders indeed come in second with 8, 4 on each side of the ball, and they were indeed a very well-balanced team. The rising Edmonton Eskimos, however, just get 4. Just 1 on offense, which wasn't that deep yet, and 3 on their pretty good defense. The lowly Bombers got 3, 2 of which were on their decent yet inconsistent offense, and 1 on their poor defense. And the BC Lions, yeah, are you just noticing now? Got none! Zilch! 0! 0! Zippity-doo! Yeah, they were bad. But they had some great players on the team still, like receiver Jim Young, but at the same time, he was up against a lot of heavy talent this year who had great seasons, so it makes sense why the Lions may not have gotten the selection. It's actually the first time since 1961, even before all Canadian teams were handed out, that the Lions came up with none. And they only had 2 the year prior. Well, that indeed does it for part 1 of the 1967 CFL All-Stars, the Western Division. Be sure to tune into part 2 as we cover the Eastern Division, led by the Grey Cup champions, the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Please leave a suggestion in the comments, and what other seasons you would like to see us cover. Like and share the video, subscribe to the channel. Until next time, I'll see ya!